Welcome to our viewers tuning in. You're watching Weekly News Highlights, where we bring you some of the biggest stories that made the headlines this week. Let's take a look at the keywords for this second week of June. President Yoon Suk Yeol continued his diplomatic voyage, this time in Central Asia. We bring you some of the highlights of his state visit to 3 Central Asian countries: Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. Moving on, tensions have escalated on the Korean Peninsula, with North and South Korea engaging in tit-for-tat exchanges, including the resumption of loudspeaker campaigns and more trash-carrying balloons from the North. How are these clashes unfolding, and how have the North and South responded? Finally, it was a week of celebrations for BTS fans. The band's oldest member, Jin, completed his mandatory military service, and the group celebrated its 11th debut anniversary with fans. We begin this week with the first stop on President Yoon Suk Yeol's trip to Central Asia, Turkmenistan. South Korea and Turkmenistan agreed to expand cooperation in energy and construction, paving the way for future deals and projects. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young, who traveled with the president, has this report.
South Korea and Turkmenistan have agreed to boost cooperation on major energy and infrastructure projects, which are expected to rake in some $6 billion worth of contracts for Korean firms. This came on Monday as President Yoon Suk Yeol and his Turkmen counterpart Serdar Bermuhamedov held a bilateral summit in Ashgabat and issued a joint statement as they oversaw the signing of some 8 memorandums of understanding.
오늘 저는 베르디 무하메도프 대통령님과 회담을 갖고 기존 협력을 더욱 내실화하고 협력의 지평을 미래지향적으로 확대함으로써 우리의 호혜적 동반자 관계를 더욱 심화 발전시키기로 하였습니다.
Turkmenistan and South Korea see enormous potential for joint cooperation in creating a supercontinental shipping route from Asia to Europe between East and West and North and South. We confirmed our mutual interest in expanding cooperation in the energy sector.
During their talks, the two leaders agreed to strengthen collaborations on large-scale construction projects, as Hyundai Engineering inked a deal with state-owned Turkmen Gas for the 4-stage desulfurization facility at the Galkanish gas field and resume operation of the Kianli polymer plant on the Caspian coast. The top-level meeting is also expected to boost Daewoo Engineering's chances of clinching orders for urea and ammonia fertilizer plants in Turkmenistan. These potential construction projects combined could generate some $6 billion worth of contracts, according to Yoon's Senior Secretary for Economic Affairs. To further boost business activities and exchanges, the two governments signed a bilateral framework to promote trade and investment in various sectors, including energy, green economy, and digital technology.
TIPF is an institutional mechanism for not only trade and investment, but also strategic cooperation across industry and energy in response to changes in the global trading order. Turkmenistan has not yet joined the WTO, so it was not easy for our companies to access the local market. But with the conclusion of this TIPF, a stable investment environment will be created.
Yoon and Bermuhamedov also backed collaborations on developing smart cities and transport infrastructure in a separate deal, as well as agreeing to ramp up cooperation in areas like shipbuilding, ICT, healthcare, climate response, and development cooperation. Their governments recently agreed to increase flight operations between the two countries from the current twice a week to 5 times a week, which would promote bilateral exchanges. During the summit, both leaders recognized the need for the complete denuclearization of North Korea for global peace and prosperity, emphasizing the importance of fulfilling international obligations under UN Security Council resolutions.
As they elevated their partnership to new heights, the Turkmen leader expressed his support for President Yoon's K-Silk Road initiative, South Korea's first ever regional strategy for comprehensive cooperation with Central Asia, from procuring natural resources to increasing human exchanges and development assistance.
As part of his 3-nation tour in Central Asia this week, President Yoon will also travel to Kazakhstan on Tuesday and Uzbekistan on Thursday. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And at his next stop, Kazakhstan, President Yoon held a summit with his Kazakh counterpart. The two leaders discussed a wide range of topics, including energy cooperation, technology exchange, climate change, and North Korea. Here is our Oh Soo-young once again.
South Korea and Kazakhstan have agreed to work together to secure energy, resources and critical mineral supplies, inking bilateral deals to bolster their strategic partnership. This came on Wednesday as President Yoon Suk Yeol and his Kazakh counterpart Kassym-Jomart Tokayev held a summit in Astana and oversaw the signing of 11 memorandums of understanding.
우리 두 정상은 세계적인 복합 위기와 불확실성에 직면한 오늘날 글로벌 중추국가를 지향하는 한국과 새로운 카자흐스탄 건설을 추구하는 카자흐스탄 간의 협력이 그 어느 때보다 중요하다는 데 의견을 같이 했습니다. 이를 위해 우리 두 정상은 전략적 동반자 관계를 더욱 호혜적이고 미래지향적인 파트너십으로 키워나가기로 했습니다.
More than 700 Korean companies in Kazakhstan with Korean capital are operating successfully. Going forward, we are interested in strengthening cooperation in the fields of infrastructure, industry, finance, energy, environment, automotive, aerospace, AI, and electronics.
According to their joint statement, the two sides agreed to further energy cooperation, with Kazakhstan to continue supplying Korea with uranium and crude oil, and consider the possibility of increasing uranium supplies. They also agreed to cooperate on power generation, with South Korea seeking to help its firm secure power plant modernization and renewable energy projects in Kazakhstan. Also, as South Korea is in need of critical minerals to back its foremost high-tech industries, such as semiconductors, Seoul signed a deal to foster partnerships with Kazakhstan across the entire cycle of exploration, mining and smelting of major minerals, including lithium. They will also provide opportunities for Korean firms to participate in prioritized fields of development and production of minerals. Further deals will support collaborations on Kazakhstan's national infrastructure projects. The summit also laid the groundwork for future-oriented cooperation through knowledge sharing for development policies and increasing training and exchanges of talents in science, technology and ICT. To jointly respond to climate change, Seoul and Astana will cooperate on greenhouse gas reduction projects and forestry. People-to-people exchanges is another focal point, with Kazakhstan being home to some 120,000 ethnic Koreans. The two sides agreed to boost exchanges in culture, tourism, education and sport, and resume direct flights from Astana to Incheon. As they strengthen solidarity on various fronts, Seoul and Astana also discussed regional and global security. They called for the denuclearization of North Korea, deeming it a necessary step for global peace and stability, and urging the regime to cease its provocations. Kazakhstan, with its history of nuclear disarmament, supported Yoon's audacious initiative of offering economic benefits for the North's denuclearization. Going forward, the two leaders expressed their will to continue their summit exchanges, with Tokayev accepting Yoon's invitation to visit Korea. Yoon, since Monday, has been on a week-long tour of 3 Central Asian countries.
Marking 15 years of their strategic partnership, the two sides agreed to reinforce and broaden their cooperation to the regional level, to back South Korea's new K-Silk Road initiative to engage with Central Asian countries in economic security, development and culture. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Astana.
The final stop of the South Korean leader's Central Asia tour, Uzbekistan. Ahead of his bilateral summit with the Uzbek president, President Yoon outlined his hopes for the outcomes of his visit. Oh Soo-young reports once again.
President Yoon Suk Yeol plans to ramp up South Korea's special strategic partnership with Uzbekistan through stronger cooperation in resources and infrastructure, as well as cutting-edge technology. In a written interview with an Uzbek media outlet published Thursday, ahead of his state visit to the Central Asian country, Yoon said he aims to bolster bilateral ties to become more mutually beneficial and future-oriented. Since establishing diplomatic ties in 1992, South Korea and Uzbekistan have broadened the scope of their economic cooperation to include automobiles, energy, electronics, textiles, finance and telecommunications, with bilateral trade hitting an all-time high of $2.46 billion last year. Yoon said his 3-day visit will aim to build on the two countries' special strategic partnership forged in 2019 and establish close cooperation on energy, infrastructure and supply chains, and crucially, critical minerals to power Korea's high-tech industries, including semiconductors. The president highlighted advanced digital technology and AI semiconductors as key areas of collaboration. In this summit with Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev and a bilateral business forum scheduled Friday, Yoon also plans to back Korean companies in their efforts to secure local energy and infrastructure projects and make inroads into other industries.
So far, Korea-Uzbekistan relations have made remarkable progress centered on the energy and infrastructure fields. And today, cooperation is expanding to more diverse fields such as supply chains, healthcare, climate change, education, and public administration.
Acknowledging the 170,000 ethnic Koreans living in Uzbekistan, Yoon described it as a brother nation, as it's the only country in the region that has a special strategic partnership with Korea. He also pledged greater interest and support for overseas Koreans going forward.
President Yoon says he hopes the two sides will create a 21st century Silk Road through broader cooperation and human exchanges in cutting-edge fields, and as core partners of Seoul's new K-Silk Road initiative designed to boost engagement with Central Asian countries in economic security, development and culture. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Tashkent.
Tensions are reaching new heights on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea has resumed its loudspeaker broadcast on the inner Korean border for the first time since 2016 in response to the North's trash-carrying balloon campaign. Right, so for more on this, we have our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung in the studio. Welcome, Min-jung.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So, Min-jung, my first question for you is, the North's trash balloon deliveries to the South has prompted the South Korean military to reactivate its loudspeaker campaign. So how did this all unfold?
To give you a brief background, the loudspeaker campaigns were officially suspended in 2018 as part of an inter-Korean military agreement to diffuse tensions along the border. So the North's continued balloon provocations prompted the South to reactivate its loudspeaker campaigns for the first time in 6 years. The last broadcast, however, was in 2016 following the North's fourth nuclear test. It aired K-pop, news, and criticism of the regime's human rights abuses, drawing anger from the North. The South Korean military reportedly blasted similar messages for around 2 hours on Sunday afternoon and played songs such as Dynamite and Butter by BTS. An expert says that Kim Jong-un would not be happy knowing that the elite families in the capital might hear the broadcasts.
And it's important to remember that many of the soldiers in the forward area are from the elite Songbun. They're people who are from the elites out of Pyongyang, children of elites. So reaching them is something which the North is really not going to like, as they demonstrated in 2015.
Right, so South Korea is clearly sending a strong message to the North. So how is the regime responding to all this?
Well, North Korea is not about to back down. More trash-carrying balloons were sent shortly after the resumption of broadcast from the South, and the sister of North Korea's leader Kim Yo-jong threatened there would be, quote, new responses if South Korea continued to engage in provocations. The Joint Chiefs of Staff on Monday also detected signs of North Korea installing loudspeakers near the inter-Korean border. Now, this could be seen as a tit-for-tat move by the North, but the South Korea's military said there had been no broadcast by Thursday. An expert says the current tensions could begin to de-escalate since at the end of the day, both South and North Korea want to avoid further tensions.
So I think Kim Yo-jong is trying to send a message to South Korea that this is what we are doing. We don't want to escalate anymore unless you continue, right? So what South Korea can do in response is, I think South Korea also wants to respond to what North Korea has done, but then at the same time, South Korea also doesn't want to escalate any further.
Right, and the growing animosity here on the Korean Peninsula led to like a rare public display of deterrence by the South Korean Navy. So please tell us more about that.
South Korea's Navy conducted training on Tuesday with its 3,000-ton submarine Anmu in waters off the port city of Busan. During the training, the Navy launched a torpedo attack against a hypothetical North Korean submarine, which was intruding on the de facto maritime border. The Anmu is a core asset of the South's kill chain preemptive strike system, a pillar of the three-axis defense system designed to deter North Korean attacks. It's armed with torpedoes, mines, and guided missiles, and equipped with vertical launching tubes for SLBMs to strike ground targets.
Right, and on top of all that, we saw North Korean soldiers recently stepping into South Korean territory. So what was this about?
Right, a small group of North Korean troops briefly crossed the inter-Korean border last Sunday while working within the demilitarized zone. According to South Korea's military, the troops briefly crossed some 50 meters over the military demarcation line at around noon after it appeared they'd become lost. They then immediately returned north after the South Korean military aired warning broadcast and fired warning shots. The military said no suspicious activity was spotted. But these North Korean soldiers were seen carrying pickaxes, so some pundits are assuming the troops were there to install mines.
Right, so we will need to find out whether that was really the case. All right, Min-jung, thank you so much for your wrap-up today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Right, as we've just talked about, with tensions simmering on the Korean Peninsula, South Korea and the United States convened the third meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group in Seoul. The allies announced new guidelines, including ways to respond to potential North Korean nuclear attacks. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji provides a wrap-up of the talks.
Officials from South Korea and the U.S. met in Seoul on Monday to hold the third meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group. This is a group that the two countries agreed to establish last year when their leaders met in Washington, aiming to bolster extended deterrence against North Korea's nuclear missile programs. In a press conference following the meeting, the two sides announced that they have finished reviewing joint guidelines on ways to deter threats and how to respond and communicate in case of a possible nuclear attack from North Korea.
Today, the NCG completed its review of the guidelines document, perhaps our most significant progress in the first year of the NCG. The guidelines provide principles for how policy and military authorities will work together to maintain a credible and effective nuclear deterrence policy and posture against the evolving security environment.
Although exact details were not revealed due to security reasons, the U.S. official added that both sides will use the guidelines to deepen cooperation, particularly on combined concepts, exercises, and activities. Seoul's defense ministry also said the two countries will continue to develop these guidelines.
We agreed to continue improving and advancing the joint guidelines that will lay a solid foundation for strengthening cooperation on the unified extended deterrence between South Korea and the U.S.
The two sides also discussed ways to increase the visibility of U.S. strategic assets deployments around the Korean Peninsula, as well as ways to conduct conventional and nuclear integration exercises. The first Nuclear Consultative Group meeting was held last July, and the second in December. The two countries announced that the fourth meeting will be held at the end of this year in the U.S. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Now, another big developing story this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin may visit North Korea for the first time in over 2 decades. South Korea's presidential office says this visit could happen very soon. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil explains why now and what could be discussed between Moscow and Pyongyang.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Pyongyang looks to be imminent. Several media are reporting signs of the regime making preparations ahead of the visit by moving airplanes parked near Pyongyang International Airport's main terminal and decorating Kim Il-sung Square. An official at the South Korean presidential office also confirmed the visit, saying it will take place within a few days. The question comes down to why it is happening now.
The objective of Putin's visit to North Korea is to solidify Russia's relationship with North Korea, which has elevated to alliance-like military and economic partnership. Putin and Kim Jong-un met in Russia in last year, so it was expected that Putin would visit back North Korea after the presidential inauguration this year.
With the upcoming visit, experts say the relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang could reach a new level. They say treaties on military and security cooperation could be signed between the two parties aimed at elevating their strategic relations. The last time Putin visited Pyongyang was in July 2000. He met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's father Kim Jong-il and ratified a joint declaration reaffirming their close bilateral relationship. But experts say things have changed significantly in the last 2 decades.
The biggest difference compared to 2000 is the war in Ukraine broke out, where there's a much higher level of military and security cooperation between North Korea and Russia. For Russia, strategic cooperation with North Korea has become very important, and for North Korea pursuing a higher level relationship including military and security cooperation compared to previous economic and scientific technological cooperation with Russia has become its absolute national interest.
He added it's important for the South Korean government to continue sending messages that there mustn't be any military cooperation that violates UN Security Council resolutions. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Now to the economy. The World Bank has increased its global growth forecast for this year slightly thanks to the U.S. economy. Now, however, the agency paints a bleaker picture for developing economies. Kim Bo-kyung reports.
A rosier global growth outlook for this year. The World Bank has projected the global growth outlook for 2024 to be at 2.6%, expecting the global economy to stabilize for the first time in 3 years. This is an upgrade from its previous prediction of 2.4% made in January, and the agency further expects global growth to edge up to an average of 2.7% in 2025 and 2026.
We see after 3 years consecutive weakness in terms of growth, we will see stable growth this year. Growth is going to be around 2.6%. And in fact, next year we are expecting a little bit of a pickup.
After a long slump due to COVID-19, the global economy has been expanding steadily since 2021 as the world recovered from the impact of the pandemic. Yet the World Bank pointed out that global growth remains weak compared to past standards, as there had been an average of 3.1% annual growth in the decade before COVID-19. It is worth noting that the revised forecast also owes much to the growth in the U.S. economy, while prospects for the world's poorest nations are worrying. The agency forecasts the U.S. economy to expand 2.5% this year, the same as last year, but up sharply from the bank's previous prediction of just 1.6% in January. Meanwhile, developing economies are projected to grow 4% on average this year, slightly slower than in 2023, with the World Bank highlighting their punishing levels of debt service and constricting trade possibilities. The World Bank, in fact, has downgraded its forecast in 3 out of 4 low-income economies since January. Global inflation is expected to drop to 3.5% this year and 2.9% in 2025. But with a slower than expected pace of decline, many central banks are forecast to remain cautious over lowering interest rates. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now to the U.S., the Federal Reserve has kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged for the 7th consecutive time. Our economics correspondent Park Geon-woo explains why the central bank made this decision and whether we might see a rate cut this year.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has maintained its benchmark interest rates once again and is forecasting fewer rate cuts to happen this year than earlier predicted. In a 2-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting which ended on Wednesday local time, the committee decided unanimously to keep key interest rates at the 5.25 to 5.5% range. This was the 7th consecutive meeting where the Fed has kept its interest rates at the same level, the highest since 2001. The gap between South Korea's interest rates remained the same with a 2 percentage point difference. The Fed's decision came after U.S. Labor Department released its Consumer Price Index for May earlier in the day. The CPI in May saw an on-year increase of 3.3%, slowing down 0.1% from the previous month. Core CPI, excluding volatile food and energy prices, was up by 3.4% on year, which was 0.1% lower than previous estimates. Though Fed Chair Jerome Powell called the recent inflation report a good reading, he said it would take longer to get the confidence needed for the Fed to loosen its policy.
The most recent inflation readings have been more favorable than earlier in the year, however, and there has been modest further progress toward our inflation objective. We'll need to see more good data to bolster our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%.
Also on Wednesday, the Fed predicted that there could be a single rate cut before the end of the year. That's different from its forecast made in March, when 3 rate cuts were predicted. As there are 4 FOMC meetings left in 2024, watchers are now focusing on whether the Fed will cut interest rates before the presidential election in November. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Now on the cultural front, it was a big, exciting week for fans of K-pop superstars BTS. Jin, the oldest member of the group, completed his 18-month mandatory military service on Wednesday, becoming the first member to be discharged while the other 6 members are still serving. Jin resumed his BTS activities with a fan hug event on Thursday at the annual BTS Festa, which celebrates the anniversary of the group's debut on June 13th. This year's Festa featured various fan activities, including BTS-themed photo booths and souvenir vending machines. Now, despite temperatures soaring above 30 degrees Celsius, the outdoor festival site was packed with fans showing their excitement for Jin's return and the group's 11th birthday. Here's what some of the ARMYs had to say.
For me, it's really important because my bias is Jin. So yes, Kim Sok-jin. So he comes back, and I don't know, I feel like my favorite person in the world, come back to me, and it's really important.
This is like a dream come true because we both always wanted to go here, and then we are here and we are living this experience.
And BTS will reconvene as a complete group after June 2025, when all 7 members have finished their military service. Staying in Korea, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake hit Busan County in Jeollabuk-do Province on Wednesday morning. This was the strongest earthquake detected in the country since a 2017 quake in Pohang. It's also the first time a quake stronger than magnitude 4 has hit the province. Though no serious injuries were reported, there were reports of broken windows, cracked walls, and damaged fences. In response, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety raised the nation's disaster control alert to level 1, the first in its 3-stage system, and issued the 3rd highest earthquake alert in its 4-level system on Wednesday. And that's all for weekly news highlights for the second week of June. Thank you so much for watching and hope you have a great rest of the weekend.